life and the black people. And what Garvey declared was that everywhere he went, the situation was that black people were on the bottom. And he said that's unnatural. Somewhere in the world, white people should be on the bottom. It shouldn't be where every time you see blacks and whites in any situation, in any country. He went to Nicaragua, to Costa Rica, to Panama. Everywhere, black people on the bottom, white people on the top. It's not natural. Somewhere in the law of nature, if things were fair, it would be different. So Garvey declared that the black man and woman had to organize themselves into a universal Negro Improvement Association. And that's what he created. He was a young man who created this. In his 20s, he said, I'm going to create this organization. I'm going to make this thing happen because I know we have as much intelligence as anybody else. We're going to organize and create the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League. That was Garvey, a black man. Many more things we can say about it. Then there was Marshall Keeble. Marshall Keeble founded the National Christian Institute. I talked about that. At least if he didn't found it, he was the most significant president of it. And one of the things that he taught was discipline. He believed that if you said you were going to do something, you should do it.
Yes.
Dependability. That not only should you do what you say you're going to do, but you should have the discipline to want to make your place the cleanest, the nicest, the best.
Yes.
If you were walking through the street and he was behind you and he saw a piece of paper on the floor,
That's right.
he would call you back, Floyd, what's that? You say, well, Brother Keeper, that's a piece of paper. He said, well, why you walk behind me? Pick it up. That was his spirit. His spirit was a spirit of excellence. A black man with a sense of excellence. Nat Turner with courage. We don't even teach Nat Turner. You know, it was amazing. If we lived in a country that we truly control the education of our children, we would teach about Nat Turner. I'm serious. If we lived in a country where African Americans had control of the curriculum, we would teach about our greatest heroes. He was a great hero. In 1831, as an enslaved African on a farm, who only read a little bit, but got some hint that what was going on in his life was not correct, Nat Turner rose up in a revolt against the slave system. This was a courage that we had not seen before on such a grand scale. There have been other instances. I guess we had seen it outside of the United States. We had seen it in Brazil with Zumbi and Zumaganga because they created the Palmares Republic. We had seen it in Haiti with the great heroic struggle led by Toussaint Louverture and by that great General Dessalines, who in 1804 got the French to declare that they had lost the war against the African people at Haiti. We don't know these stories. You know, at least my father did tell me about Toussaint Louverture. But Toussaint Louverture, even though he started the war and was a great general, didn't end the war. The war was ended in Haiti by Dessalines at the Battle of Verdier, and I stood on the same ground where he declared independence of Haiti. This was a powerful thing. 3 black generals, Toussaint Louverture, Dessalines, and Christophe, defeated the French army, the greatest army of its era at that time. It was greater than the French army. This was Napoleon's army. Napoleon's army was defeated by black men, 3 black generals, outmaneuvered the generals that had been sent by Napoleon, and caused, when we talk about, for example, the Louisiana Purchase, why did the United States get Louisiana? It got Louisiana because the black people in Haiti had so destroyed the French economy by taking Haiti that the French people had to sell Louisiana to the United States to get some money in their treasury. That's how we got Louisiana, the Louisiana Purchase. Because Haiti made it possible. And we forget the Haitians. People criticize Haiti. People criticize the Haitian culture, one of the most resilient of all African cultures. I mean, people like Bookman. How can you criticize people? You have no understanding of your own history, culture, if you criticize the Haitian. This is the most noble story of African people in the Americas. At least, let's say, one of the most noble. But it certainly is a standard by which all other African people see, value it. And it's a standard that we ought to keep. One last one, and then I will be finished with the example that I'll just make a few comments. Martin Delany. Martin Delany. Now this is a name that's been dropped also from our consciousness, but it should never have been dropped from our consciousness. He's the father of black nationalism in the United States. Lived in the 1800s, before the end of slavery. Martin Delany, D-E-L-A-N-Y. Very important, critical. You cannot understand American history without understanding Martin Delany. Martin Delany lived in Pittsburgh. He was a physician, a surgeon. But in 1850, the American government decided that they were going to have a compromise. This is between the North and the South. This is before the Civil War. The Civil War happened right after this, a few years after this, but this is before. 1850, they come up with what they call a compromise because they want to bring some new states into the Union. But the question was whether these new states would be free or slave states. Would Kansas be a free state or a slave state? There's a big debate in Congress over there. And so they said, let's do a compromise. And the South said, we'll let you bring Kansas in as a free state so long as you in the North will allow us to pursue any African anywhere in the North who has escaped from freedom, to freedom. If an African runs from Georgia to Kansas or to New York or to Pennsylvania, we want to have the right to go after them and bring them back. So the North said, well, okay, if you give us, let California come in, let Kansas come in, and they're free, we'll give you the right to have this fugitive slave law. That's what it was called, a fugitive slave law. When this law was enacted under President Millard Fillmore, many black people were pursued. Some of them who were free, had been free all along. White people could just leave from Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, and go get them. Some black people bring them back into bondage. They had to pick them up on the street, kidnap them, bring them back and say, you know, you're mine, you belong to me. If they were questioned by the law would have to go along with them, whoever the law is, because since the black person had no rights in court. So if a white man said you are a slave, then you are a slave. It was a tragic situation. Now let me just tell you something about this, because you need to know this. About 50 years earlier, in 1796, there had been a similar law, but the northern states had decided to ignore it. So if a black person was picked up, then all the black person would go to the sheriff and say, look, this guy's trying to take me into slavery. And then the sheriff would say, you can't take the person into slavery. But in the 1850 law, the South made sure that the law would say that the legal officers, the sheriffs and the judges in the North had to go along with the white people who were arresting the fugitives. If they did not, they would have to pay $1,000. Back in those days, you have so if you were a police officer and a black person comes up to you and say, you know, you got to save me, this guy's trying to, I can't do it. If I do it, I have to pay $1,000. So black people were being snatched, left and right, snatched, taken into slavery. And that's when we decided to go to Canada. You remember, people say black people started going to Canada. We didn't go to Canada first. First, we just went across Mason-Dixon. That's the first thing you just get. If I can get across the Ohio River, I'm fine. But now, after 1850, you can't just get across the Ohio River, because if you get to Ohio or Michigan, you're going to be snatched and taken right back to bondage. So they had a big meeting in 1850 in Pittsburgh. And the mayor of the city called Martin Delany to speak for the black people. And Martin Delany came and he said, if I can remember this correctly, he said, Honorable Mayor of Pittsburgh, whatever ideas I have received about liberty, I have received from reading the lives of your revolutionary fathers. And one of those ideas is that a man has a right to defend his castle, even with his life, even to the taking of life. Sir, my house is my castle, and in it dwells none but my wife and my children, as free as the angels in heaven, and with a liberty as sacred as the pillars of God. If any man, be he a constable, be he a sheriff, be he a judge of the Supreme Court, no, let it be he who sanctioned this law, who created this law himself, Millard Fillmore, the president. Let it be him, with his cabinet as his bodyguard, and the Declaration of Independence waving over his head as his banner, and the Constitution of his country on his breast as his shield. If he crosses the threshold of my door in search of a slave, and I do not lay him a lifeless corpse at my feet, may the grave refuse my body a resting place, and righteous heaven my spirit a home. No, he cannot enter my house, and we both live. They called him after that a black nationalist. He's the father of black nationalism. Martin Delany, self-determination, a black man. Now, what have I learned by these lives of these men? I've learned that in the African-American community, what we need, and what our young men particularly need, because if you go to prisons, and I've been to good prisons, I've given my speeches at prisons, And it's a very sad story because in some of the prisons you see 80% of all the prisoners are black in some of the northern states. And they're young men from 18 to 45 years of age, most of them. And so sometimes when the sisters ask where are the men, they're in prison. That's where they are. They've been picked up. They're in prison. And part of it is, again, now, there is a responsibility from the part of the sisters because most often mothers train these young men. And sometimes, as some people say, we raise our daughters, but we don't raise our men, our young men. And so the young men tend to be sometimes men that the mothers will not even want their daughters to marry. But they're raising these boys. They're the ones who are creating these boys. They're the ones who started very early with this notion of materialism, this notion of the bling, and this notion of you can do whatever you want to do, and so on. I mean, we all are part of this problem. You see what I'm saying? So we got to start this problem at 3 years old. You stop this at 3 years old. You don't let this go. It's something you have to begin very early. But I raise this issue because when I think about it, and I think about the lessons that have to be learned, and to see these lessons as they develop and emerge, one of the things that occurs to me is that discipline is at the root of a lot of issues. We have to have, if you're going to be a man, then discipline is important. That means also something else, sacrifice. And we see it in the examples we have. I look at these great examples. I try to model my own character and life after these examples. We talk about discipline. We talk about character. We talk about dependability. We talk about bravery and courage. I mean, we talk about protection and security of family. We talk about spirituality and rituals and ceremony and etiquette. All those things, those are the valuable traits that help to not only build a people, but to build a nation. You have to have those qualities. And in closing, let me just say that the greatest value in the African tradition is character. It is the greatest value. I always go back to this because I did some work on my DNA some years ago. I came up with the fact that on my father's side, my family goes back to the Yoruba people in Nigeria. And I study Yoruba culture. And Yoruba culture is extremely powerful culture. And one of the values that the Yoruba people have is that the significant aspect of life for everything is character. It's not education, it's not money, it's not fame. It's certainly not the concept that we sometimes say in the West. We like to use the concept love. We say love is the greatest thing. But the Africans don't have this concept. The concept of love doesn't even exist in most African philosophies. So it's not even that. It's about what your duties are, your obligations, your responsibilities, what you're supposed to do, your character. What's your character? That's the thing. In fact, there is a verse in the sacred writings of the Yoruba people, and that writing is called, this is a book you may have never heard of, it's called the Odu Ifa, I-F-A, the Odu Ifa. Look it up on Google, Odu Ifa. In Odu Ifa, it says that God demands of you one thing, and one thing only. It's not your money, it's not your education, it's not even your children. God demands of you character, good character. Because if you have good character, you will do everything. Everything is predictable. You got good character. The word is Iwa, Pele. I-W-A, Iwa, Pele, P-E-L-E. Ewok. Character is Ewok. Ewok is character. Good character. Ewok Pele. If you have that, if you don't have it, you can have money. But the money does not belong to you if you don't have Ewok Pele. You can have children, but your children don't belong to you if you don't have Ewok Pele. You can have education, but the education is not yours if you don't have Ewok Pele. So what we want our men to have is good character. Show me a man with good character, and then I will introduce that person to my sister, or my niece, or my aunt, or my aunt, or so on. That I want my daughter. Show me that person with good character. That's what I want. I don't want him just to say I love you. Show me good character. You show me dependability, discipline, courage, character. Those are the qualities we need in a man. I want to say thank you very much. And thank you for that.
They used to say, when you hear speeches like that, you can hear a pin drop. No shouting, no hollering.